Four engine manufacturers just voted to kill Ferrari's entire car concept mid-season. The SF-26 was built around one device, a tiny exhaust flap called FTM, and now the FIA might force Ferrari to rip it out. The problem? The whole rear of the car depends on it. Ferrari called it FTM, short for flick tail mode, and this thing was wild. The flap sat right in front of the exhaust and redirected the hot gases flowing out of the engine. That extra airflow helped the diffuser and rear wing create more downforce, giving the car more grip and stability at high speed. And here's the part that made rivals nervous. Ferrari didn't just bolt this onto the car later. Nope. The entire SF-26 was built around FTM from day one. The gearbox differential was pushed farther back just to create space for it. The rear crash structure had to be redesigned. Even the cooling system was changed to make the whole setup work properly. Every major decision at the rear of the car revolved around this one device. During Bahrain testing, the FIA checked it and said it was legal. Ferrari rolled into the season thinking they had found a major advantage. But then Miami changed everything. Suddenly, 6 rival teams showed up with their own versions of the idea, and the FIA quickly realized this grey area was turning into a full-on technical battle. That's when things got messy. 4 rival engine manufacturers voted to support banning the system, leaving Ferrari stunned because the entire rear end of their car depended on FTM working. Now, the team faced losing the very feature their whole concept was built around. Let me break down what FTM actually does, because the technical explanations make it sound way more complicated than it really is. When an engine burns fuel, hot exhaust gases blast out through the back of the car. Normally, that energy just disappears into the air and does nothing useful. Ferrari looked at that and thought, why waste it? That's where the FTM system came in. Ferrari's setup grabs those exhaust gases and pushes them across a small flap placed right in front of the exhaust exit. It sounds simple, but the effect is huge. The fast-moving hot air boosts the airflow around the diffuser, underneath the car, and the rear wing above it. That extra airflow helps the whole rear of the car work harder at high speed. And in Formula One, more airflow means more downforce. More downforce means more grip through corners. More grip means drivers can carry more speed, protect the tires better, and stay quicker over an entire race distance. The estimated gain from the system was believed to be anywhere from 3 to 5/10 of a second per lap, depending on the track, and that's massive in modern F1. On circuits filled with medium and slow-speed corners, which covers a huge part of the 2026 calendar, that kind of advantage could completely shake up the grid. What made Ferrari's version even more dangerous was how perfectly it matched the new 2026 engine rules. Under the updated hybrid regulations, engines have to stay at high revs even in slower corners, so the battery systems can keep charging properly. That means strong exhaust flow is constantly available, exactly when Ferrari needs the FTM system producing extra downforce. Other manufacturers couldn't match it as easily. Ferrari's smaller turbo setup was built for super-fast spool-up and aggressive energy recovery, creating a steady stream of high-velocity exhaust gases that made the FTM incredibly effective. And Ferrari didn't stop there. They even shoved the differential as far back as possible to maximize the whole concept. If you're enjoying the content, please hit like and subscribe. It helps the channel immensely. Ferrari went all in on the FTM idea. They even redesigned the gearbox casing to make it much narrower than normal, creating extra room inside the diffuser area without adding extra size or weight to the rear of the car. Every single detail on the back of the SF-26 was built around making this system work at maximum power. That's why almost nobody could copy it right away. Haas was the only team able to react quickly because they buy major rear-end components directly from Ferrari, giving them access to a very similar layout from the start. Everyone else had to scramble and come up with different solutions. Ferrari first ran the FTM setup during Bahrain testing back in February. The FIA inspected it, reviewed the design, and ruled it legal. After that, Ferrari raced the system through Australia, China, and Japan without facing any official complaints or rule changes. At that point, it looked like Ferrari had discovered a serious loophole and escaped clean with it. But then Miami happened, and everything changed fast. 6 different teams arrived with their own versions of exhaust flap systems. They weren't exact copies of Ferrari's design because most teams couldn't physically recreate Ferrari's rear gearbox positioning. The packaging was too extreme. Instead, rival engineers found alternative ways to create similar aerodynamic effects using their own layouts and airflow tricks. The second multiple teams joined the game, the FIA suddenly had a much bigger problem on its hands. What started as one clever Ferrari idea was turning into a full-scale development war. Every team was preparing to push the concept further and further, chasing more downforce and bigger lap time gains. That's when alarm bells started ringing inside the FIA. The system may have been technically legal, but officials believed the designs were moving away from what the regulations originally intended. And once teams become dependent on a grey area innovation like this, things can spiral out of control very quickly in Formula One. The FIA has seen this kind of situation before, and every time it turns into chaos fast. Back in 2009, it was the double diffuser. Then came the blown exhaust era in 2012, and before that, the famous F-duct system shook up the grid. Whenever teams discover a grey area that delivers huge lap time gains, the FIA usually steps in before one idea completely takes over the championship. That's exactly what started happening with Ferrari's FTM concept. The uncomfortable part for Ferrari is the timing. The FIA approved the system back in February during pre-season testing. Ferrari then spent months shaping the entire rear of the SF-26 around it. The gearbox geometry, internal packaging, cooling layout, and rear-end structure were all designed specifically to support FTM. This wasn't some small upgrade they could easily remove later. It became part of the car's DNA. Now, only a few months into the season, the rules are suddenly shifting underneath them. And for Ferrari, that's a brutal situation, because redesigning major parts of the car during the season could cost performance, money, and valuable development time. What really turned the pressure up was the reaction from rival manufacturers. 4 major engine groups reportedly supported banning the FTM idea: Mercedes, Red Bull Powertrains, Honda, and Audi. That's basically every major rival Ferrari has on the grid lining up against the concept at the same time. Their argument is pretty direct. They believe the system creates an aerodynamic advantage linked directly to exhaust flow, making it a form of engine-dependent aero. And Formula One has tried to move away from that kind of design for years. Systems that tie engine performance too closely to aerodynamic performance have caused major problems in the past. They make the cars harder to regulate, more difficult for teams to understand, and nearly impossible to match unless rivals copy the exact same engine architecture and packaging philosophy. And beyond the technical concerns, there's also a huge competitive fight brewing behind the scenes. Ferrari's FTM system works especially well with their smaller turbo engine setup, and that's a huge reason rival teams are getting nervous. The way Ferrari's power unit delivers exhaust gases at lower speeds perfectly matches what the device needs to generate extra downforce. Mercedes, Honda, and Red Bull powertrains don't produce airflow in quite the same way, which means Ferrari may have unlocked an advantage tied directly to their engine philosophy. And that's where things start getting controversial. If FTM stays legal, Ferrari could end up with a built-in aerodynamic edge that other manufacturers simply can't copy without redesigning major parts of their own engines. That creates a dangerous precedent in the eyes of the FIA and rival teams. So, is Wolff defending the rules or protecting Mercedes' engine advantage? Because here's the uncomfortable part. If the FIA bans FTM, Ferrari loses the one thing closing the gap to Mercedes overnight. Technically, that argument makes sense. But there's another side to this battle too. Mercedes already has one of the strongest engines on the grid, and Ferrari used FTM to help close that gap, especially in slower corners where extra downforce matters most. If the FIA removes the system, Ferrari loses a huge chunk of that advantage overnight, and the raw engine performance difference becomes much more obvious again. So while Wolff may be defending an important principle, he's also protecting Mercedes from a rival that found a clever workaround. And Ferrari is fully aware of that political game happening behind closed doors. But this situation goes way beyond just losing a few tenths per lap in 2026. According to reports from Italian media, Ferrari had already started building its 2027 project, internally known as Project 679, with FTM included as a core part of the car's architecture from the very beginning. That's the real nightmare scenario for Ferrari. If FTM stays legal for 2026 but gets banned for 2027, the team could lose months of development work instantly. Major aerodynamic decisions at the rear of the 2027 car were reportedly designed around the assumption that FTM would remain part of the package. Removing it now wouldn't be a simple tweak. It could force Ferrari into a major redesign before the car even hits the track. The problem for Ferrari is that everything at the rear of the car is connected together like one giant system. The gearbox position, rear crash structure, diffuser shape, internal packaging, all of it was designed around the FTM concept. Change one piece, and suddenly engineers have to rethink everything around it too. That's what makes this situation so messy for the team. And now, another major rule change is coming for 2027. The FIA has already confirmed the engine balance will shift from a 50-50 split between electric and combustion power to a 60-40 split favoring the combustion engine. That means more performance coming from the internal combustion engine and less reliance on battery power. At first glance, that actually sounds like good news for Ferrari. More combustion power could help reduce the top-end disadvantage their smaller turbo setup has compared to Mercedes. But there's a catch. The exhaust gases Ferrari used to make FTM work would behave differently under the new engine architecture, meaning the whole system would need major redesign work anyway. So even if FTM somehow survived into 2027, which currently looks very unlikely, Ferrari would still have to rethink the entire concept from scratch to make it work with the new power unit regulations. The possible ban just speeds up a process that was already becoming incredibly difficult behind the scenes. Now, look at the bigger picture Ferrari is dealing with. The team brought 11 upgrades to Miami. Against Mercedes, the performance gain was basically flat. After Canada, Ferrari is expected to unlock one ADUO engine token worth around 7 to 10 extra horsepower. But if the FIA removes FTM, Ferrari could also lose close to half a second per lap in corner performance at the same time. In other words, the gains and losses may almost cancel each other out. Ferrari could end up with a car that's faster on the straights but weaker through corners compared to the current setup. And in Formula One, that trade-off can completely change how competitive a car feels across different circuits. Belgium could become the track that reveals whether Ferrari actually moved forward or just shifted its strengths around. What makes this whole story so controversial is how it started. Ferrari showed the FTM system to the FIA before the season. The FIA reviewed it and approved it. Ferrari then spent months building the entire SF-26 around that green light. Now, after rival manufacturers pushed hard against the idea, the FIA appears ready to change direction. And honestly, Ferrari may have a real reason to feel frustrated here. They followed the process, got approval, invested huge development resources, and now risk losing the very concept their car was designed around because competitors decided they didn't like where the advantage was heading. Don't forget to like and subscribe to not miss the latest F1 news.